Welcome to Canning What You Grow. My name is Holly Baird. This is brought to you by the WisconsinVegetableGardener.com. Well, today we're going to talk about the different do's and don'ts and some helpful tips in home canning. This is, again, a series of videos for the home canner. It's going to go from basic to more complicated as we get into the series. So, we're going to talk about some simple do's and don'ts. One thing I want to mention first and foremost when you're going to can or start canning is you want to make sure that you read your recipe ahead of time, and you also want to make sure you have those items on hand, obviously, and you want to make sure you clean your work area. So that includes clean utensils, clean cookware, clean surfaces, and you want to make sure you clean off any fruits or veggies, what have you, that you're using. Even something as simple as like your headspace measurer. You know, make sure your jars are clean, or your canning funnel. You don't want to have any sort of cross-contamination going on. With canning, you want to take the time now to set yourself up to have a good canning experience. So it's one thing I can definitely recommend. Another thing I can recommend is do not let any pets you have in your kitchen while you're canning. If you're in a situation where you're going to be doing a whole day of canning and maybe the pet's food is in your kitchen, you might want to take that food and put it somewhere else so that the pets don't feel like you're trying to starve them, and also so that you don't have any situation where there could be possible pet hair getting into the food. Same thing when I'm canning, I always make sure that I tie my hair back. So you also want to, when you're checking your recipe, make sure you check your processing time. If you're not sure, you know, I usually use the Ball Blue Book, or I use a trusted recipe, and it'll tell you, you know, right in the recipe, it'll say 10 minutes in a boiling water bath canner. Now, if there is an altitude adjustment, you do have to keep that in mind if you're a certain amount above sea level. The other thing you want to do is you want to start your timer when the water is boiling. Now, we use 2 timers. We actually use our trusty kitchen timer, and then we also use the digital timer on our phones, just in case. You never know with those kitchen timers when they might decide to just stop working. Another thing I would suggest is making sure that you have all of your canning supplies in one space. We keep this basket here. We have our string for when we have to tie like spice sachets. We have some fresh fruit protector. We have a little kosher dill pickle mix that we add in sometimes. And then we have our pickling salt. We have lids. We have Sure gel. And we have our jar lifter and all that good stuff all together, ready to go. And then when we're done canning, we make sure everything's all clean, put it back in there. It's in one spot so that we're not searching around for everything when it's time to can. You also want to, I'm going to talk about jars, is when you get your mason jars, or you have mason jars, especially if you bought them used, you want to make sure there's no cracks. You want to make sure that the lids, there's no dents in the lids or in the rim, and you want to make sure that there's no cracks anywhere, because if there is, you know, your jar might not seal. Also, same thing, if when you use your lids, make sure there's no weird dents in that rubber part right there. And when you fill the jar, you want to make sure you take a paper towel or a clean towel, and you want to wipe the rims off real nice. Make sure that you wipe it off once you get your product in there. You just wipe it off real good. Then you put your lid on, and then you put your band on, and you just finger it just slightly, and then you can go ahead and put it in your canner when you're all set to go. When you're doing the canning, you want to make sure that you have hot jars and hot products. A couple ways you can keep your jars hot is you can put them in your dishwasher on the warm setting. Some people keep them in their oven on the lowest setting, or some people just keep them right in their canner until it's time to go. You want to make sure you use a trusted recipe. I can't stress this enough. You don't want to use, you know, some passed down family recipe. The Ball Blue Book, there's a lot of great resources on the internet, such as SB Canning. If you have a master food preserver in the area, you can contact that person. If you don't, you can always contact your local extension. Maybe they can tell you about a master food preserver in your state. Another thing is, just like with our basket, we stay organized. Same thing with my canning binder. I have my manual for our pressure canner, for our dehydrator, and then just some different recipes that I've collected over time to go ahead and use in home canning and food preservation. You also want to, once you're done canning, or once you take the jars out of the canner, you're gonna hear the jars seal and make the ping noise. It'll go ping, and that way you know the jars are sealed. Now, say that maybe you don't hear them all seal. What I would suggest first is wait 24 hours until you assume that the jar isn't going to seal. At least 12 hours, but we usually don't touch our jars for till about 24 hours later. If it is 24 hours and you can hear that, that means it did not seal correctly. So then you want to either go ahead and refrigerate it and eat it within a week, or you can reprocess it within 24 hours after the first time. You also want to make sure that you label your jars. You definitely want to do that because, trust me, in 6 months, you might think that's pasta sauce, but it might be salsa, or it might be tomato basil jam. And if you're, cooking dinner real quick and you dump some tomato basil jam, it might be a different experience for you, but you definitely want to label them. Also, you want to take the rings off when you're storing your canning items. So once your jars are sealed and it's been 24 hours, you just go ahead, take those rings off, and which is good because then you don't have to buy these. You can just keep reusing them, and you just store it like that. And the reason is for a couple of reasons. One is that if it did not seal correctly and it becomes unsealed, it's going to be noticeable. You're going to see the lid come off, and then when you open it up, you're not going to hear it make that shh noise. The other reason is because if there is something that's causing something funny to go wrong in there, and it's going to maybe have, swelling, then instead of the jar breaking, then the top's just going to come off, and you'll see something. You'll definitely see something at that point. Also, you don't want to, when you use the recipe for something like jam or preserves, you don't want to double the recipe because the jam won't set right. So you want to make sure that you pay attention to that. A couple other things, as I had said before, with your canner, you want to make sure you have something separating the jars from the bottom of the canner. So you could use a rack. Some people will make a rack. They'll take the old lids. Maybe you have some rusty old lids. Tie them together with some wire, and they'll put that in there. Otherwise, canning rack, or people will use like old butter knives, but you definitely want some separation there. And you want to make sure that your jar is going to have, say you're not using a traditional canner, you want to make sure that your jar is going to have room so that there is room above for the water to go above the jar. So usually the largest size recommended for canning is a quart size, and as you can see, there's plenty of room there. Another thing is make sure that your recipe, if you're not sure about it, that you have enough acid, and you can go ahead and read online about that. If you do add vinegar, you want to make sure it's at a 4.6% acidity or higher. Or something like tomatoes, you can also add lemon juice. If you add lemon juice, you want to add bottled lemon juice, not fresh lemon juice, because the acidity in fresh lemon juice is not as consistent as bottled lemon juice. So those are the tips, some quick do's and don'ts I have for canning. And most of all, have fun. Have a good time. Enjoy yourself. And before you know it, you'll have plenty of stuff for you and stuff to give away as well.